So for Google Drawing Plus, I'll go through this a little quickly, and then we'll take some time to actually practice and create, and I'm going to have you do some hands-on stuff. But Google Drawings is a great way to take your assignments further. There's so much you can do with Google Drawings, both for you and for your students. It's great for students to show their learning in a variety of ways, and this is a much more visual tool than Google Docs, and it's less overwhelming than slides, because sometimes kids see even 5 slides in a slideshow, and it's too much and it's overwhelming. So we'll focus on some advanced tools, some tips and tricks, and then we'll look at some examples and creating them ourselves. All right, some advanced image options. You can take your pictures to the next level. So I'm actually going to go ahead and pull up a blank drawing so we can look at this. And you can get to your drawings either by going to drawings.google.com or by going to your drive and then selecting new and then scroll down till you get to drawings on your drive. But as you know, when you pull up a drawing, you get this checkerboard background, which means that it is transparent. So that's always nice to know, so that if you do end up printing something, the checkerboards aren't going to show up if you print it. You'll only see them here to show you that it's transparent. And when you're searching for images on Google, sometimes you'll see that transparent background as the checkerboards. So that's a good indication that an image on Google Drawings is Google image search is a PNG file, which is transparent. So I'm just going to go ahead and insert an image from the web. What I like doing with students is using this search the web function because these are copyright safe and they are more curated, so there's not going to be any naughty images. So let's say that your students are doing research reports on animals. That's something that you'll see often in the younger grade levels. So I'm going to choose an elephant because that's my favorite animal. And then all of the images here are copyright safe, so you don't have to worry about, if you look up somebody famous, you're not going to get a whole lot of pictures of them because famous people, songs, movies, those are under a lot of copyright. You're not going to find any famous elephants here like Dumbo because those are under copyright. So we can take, I like this one, and you just click on it and then click insert. And you can actually click on as many as you want and insert them all at the same time. So that's great for when students are creating collages. Some of the advanced image tools. So I'm clicked on it right now. When I click off of it, the menu choices up here go away. So I'll know that I'm on the image here by having these image choices. You can give your image a border. You can change the color of the border. You can even change if it's a dashed or dotted line. That looks a little silly. Let's just do a solid line. You can replace the image. So if you've got like a frame set up, like you want students to create a poster and you have the picture box ready to go, you can then just click that replace image button and then it'll keep the frame, it'll keep the size, it'll put their new picture into the frame. And then we've got format options over here. So there's a lot to choose from. You can choose size and rotation and actually change it. Locking aspect ratio is always good so that they can't make him a really skinny or a really squatty elephant. The students should be changing the size of a picture by the corner, not by the size here. See, now he's all skinny. And we want a good and healthy. All right, so you can change the size this way if you wanted to do it incrementally. You can change the position. You can always click and drag an image, but you can also choose like center. Now it's centered on the frame eventually. Thank you for sharing that. Why is it not centered? The little red guidelines also show up. Do you see how that red line pops up? That is now centered on the frame in that axis. And then if I go up here and now I've got 2 red lines going across it, that tells me that that image is centered. You can recolor images. This is great if you wanted, it's not quite as like, there's not as many choices as say Instagram or Snapchat. Some of your kids might be familiar with those, but you can turn an image black and white very quickly. You can add a color to it. You know, if you wanted to do something interesting there, you can turn it sepia so it looks old. Like I know when you do, you know, like the Civil War era, sometimes it's fun to have old looking photos. And then you can also just not have it recolored. You can do adjustments. These adjustments are great for fixing up photos that may not be very good quality. This photo obviously is like a professional photo, so it's colored nicely. But let's say, let's insert, this is something else fun you can do with students, is you can have them take a picture with their Chromebook camera. See, the camera pops up, you take a picture, and then you insert it. So they could take pictures around the house, they could take pictures of themselves and do an About Me poster. Whatever formatting I had set, it chooses formatting for that. So I can say I don't want a border on that one. And now on this image, let's say I want to fix up the brightness because it's a little bit dark. So I'll incrementally change the brightness on this image till it looks a little nicer and maybe increase the contrast. And then you can also make it transparent. So then we can have a creepy me on top of the elephant. So that transparency is nice if you wanted to do some sort of layering of images. So another thing you can do, I'm going to get rid of that picture because that's too much of me. Nobody needs that much, is a drop shadow. The drop shadow is really nice for making your documents, your drawings really pop and look professional. So I'm going to go ahead and make this a little bit bigger so it's easier to see. And then I'm going to change the angle of it. I like when it actually drops down. You can have an above shadow too, just by changing the angle of it. You can change the transparency so it's a lighter or darker shadow. And then the blur radius just makes it look more blurry. So it makes it look further off the page. So as you can see now, this has got a lovely drop shadow to it. And if I change the background color, just so we can see that drop shadow better. I mean, look how it's just popping off the page now. That's a really fun way to give your drawing some depth and some, you know, they look professional and fancy without actually having to do a whole lot. So that's with drop shadow. The last tool for images is reflection. I don't recommend it most of the time because it's that reflecting in a pond effect, and it can be very overwhelming. There's a lot going on with that now. So those are all, oh, let me turn that off. The image tools you can do. Let's see here. You can also add a border and masking. Masking is really fun. So if you wanted your image to be inside of a shape, that's really fun to do. I'm going to get to the cropping tool here. You can see it's the crop tool because these little black lines show up. So you can actually, you know, square your picture, get rid of some of the background if you want. That's how you get to a square picture instead of just dragging the sides in like students like to do. And then right here on this drop-down menu where it says mask, I can choose one of these shapes to put my picture inside of. So if I wanted to have a circular photo for some reason, now it's a circular photo and I still have my drop shadow behind it. So now it kind of almost looks like a button. So this could be a way that you could create, you know, digital buttons or badges to share with your students. I can click that drop down arrow next to the crop tool. I can make it into a speech bubble. So maybe it's a thought that a character is having, and now I've got a, you know, comic strip. So that masking tool, that's really fun for creating images with shapes. You could do whatever you want. Not much of the picture left if you pick something that's less square. I kind of like the, here we go, the thought bubble. So I'm thinking about elephants. And now I would add another image here with a character. So that's masking. I showed the border. You can order images, so you've got them in different orders. So let's say I have another picture. Let me insert a person. There we go. Oh, you know what? I'm going to insert her because she's thinking. She's thinking about elephants. There we go. So I'm going to move her down here. And then I don't want her in front of the elephant because that doesn't look quite as good to me because her corner is cutting it off. So I'm going to right click on the elephant. I'm going to click order and then bring to front. And now the elephant is in front of her. So you can use that order to overlap elements. You can actually overlap text also. So if I create a text box, and this is just silly text at this point, I'm not really coming up with an actual good title. But that's on top of it because it's been ordered in front. If I wanted the elephant on top of the text for whatever reason, I would just go back to order and then bring it to the front again. And now it's in front of my text box. And then you can order the text box on top of it. So you can use that layering to really have your students or yourself create, you know, graphic organizers with different layers, posters with different layers. That ordering can be really good. And then the last image tool you can use is hyperlinking. So if you're on an image, you can do Command K or Control K, depending on which computer you're on. And then you can hyperlink it. The cool thing is if you have a link you want it to go to, like notes that you have, you can do that. You can also just do Google search. So let's see here. It's not letting me scroll up. That's the only weird thing. All right, so I want it to link to this slide deck I have here. So now when students click on this image, it's now hyperlinked to this document. And you can always unlink it by clicking the link or copy the link. Or if you just click on the title of the link, now it'll open up in a separate tab. So, you know, you could have students create posters and hyperlink to their resources as a good way to cite their sources. This is a great tool to start teaching students about citations and how important it is to cite our sources. All right, so that's everything for images, that you can really make your images literally pop off the page and get kind of wild. Backgrounds is another fun tool that students will take to the extreme if you let them. When you right click anywhere on the background and then click on the background button, you can add any of the colors here or a custom color. But the really fun ones that students like that get them in trouble are gradients. If you pick one of the pre-created gradients like that, well, that's nice looking. That's not too crazy. What you can do though is create a custom gradient. And let's say I want to do our school colors or the colors of the United States. Let's just pick those because I don't know what schools you guys are at. And then I'm going to remove that. So you just keep adding and removing stops. And then you can create a gradient with as many colors. You could do an entire rainbow. You can move the bars. So let's say I just want a little bit of red and mostly white. Oh, I have to add a stop. So this is where kids will like spend all of their time doing silly things. But now I've got this, just this little bit of a rainbow of blue and red around the outside. That's not too distracting. What they will also do is have it be the entire thing with multiple colors. Let's try something crazier. So you can have as many colors as you want. And now you can see that this starts to get rather distracting. There's too much color. It's too crazy. So gradient backgrounds are fun, but you really just have to teach your students to use them appropriately. That the background should not overwhelm the topic. All right, that light gray is nice because then it kind of matches the background of my image of woman thinking. All right, advanced text tools. So we can take our text to the next level. Adding a text box is easy enough, but you can actually rotate it. You can change the position. We can do text fitting and drop shadows and reflections for text, just like an image. So when I'm on my text box here, I can right click on it. I can rotate it, you know, if I wanted to. Why didn't you rotate? There we go. If I wanted my text upside down for some reason, you can, where are the tools? There we go. So under the three little dots, I've got the format options. I can add a drop shadow to that. I can add a reflection to that. You just want to think about what's going to be easy to read. Just like a document, you can add more fonts. So we've got all of our fonts we use here. I have a lot of fonts here because I've added a bunch. But your students can go in and add more fonts and search for ones that they're going to enjoy. Scripts tend to be less readable. Here we go. Handwriting tend to be less readable because some of them are, you know, they're a little silly. You don't want to read a whole essay in that, but they're nice for titles. Serifs are the ones with feet, the little feet at the bottoms, and sans serifs don't have feet. So you can have your students search for fonts, and then they just click the check mark next to them and click OK, and then they show up in their fonts category. So, you know, just be careful. Something like this, very hard to read. I wouldn't want to see a whole poster in that. Some of them are very lightweight. So students will spend a lot of time picking out fonts if you let them. All right. You can use lines and connectors. This is another way to take your drawings to the next level. So you can actually create graphic organizers. I'm going to go ahead and start a new document, a new drawing. And so like if you wanted to create your own plot diagram because that little hill one with the triangle shape is not super helpful, you know, once you get up into the middle school, secondary English, you can actually create your own. So one way you can do that is by adding a shape very slowly. And the nice thing is students can actually write in shapes. So once you've created your shapes, they're now text boxes also. You can change the background colors of shapes or have it be transparent if you want. I'll go with a different color blue. I'm going to give it a darker blue border. Now I'm going to Command C, Command V to copy and paste it. And I want my students to do some sort of cause and effect thing. So what I'm going to do now is click on the line here, and I can either do an arrow and just have a direct arrow showing those connections, or I could do one of these connectors to connect them. And so what you're going to do is click on one, and now it's got this little connector down below. And then you can actually, oops, move it. There we go. So you can see the shape of it. So I want my, let's see here, let's move that there, move that there. So you can create custom graphic organizers with these connectors, right? So you could have students show the connections between things. And then just like anything else, for these connectors, you can change the width of the lines, the color, you know, so you can color code your graphic organizers. I never like traditional Venn diagrams because when you draw two circles, the little part in the middle is always too small to actually write in. So you can create your own custom Venn diagram that is actually easier to write in. And then once you've got your graphic organizer set up, you just double click in it and now it's a text box that you can write in.
Hey, Kristen, can you tell me again how to do the connectors?
So there's a lot of different choices. I use the elbow connector. You can actually also use the curved connector, which, you know, you just kind of move it and drag it till you get the shape that you like. Then you go back to the arrow and move it. And then I'm going to make this one a circle this time. And you can write inside any of these shapes. They're all text boxes that are just different shapes. So now I've got a curvy line going from the circle and an elbow connector as a straight line going between those two. Your other choice is just to use an arrow. These also work great if you wanted to show, you know, these work best with really thick lines, so you can draw a nice big arrow, point things out. And then with any of these, with any of these shapes or lines, you can change the position, you can change the length. For the arrow, you can actually change the end point. So if you wanted to do like a baton, and see what you could also do is create little, now I've got this pin that I could drop on a map if I wanted to do some sort of map activity and drop a pin. So there's so much you can do with these, you know, and your students will get very creative too, showing connections, making different shapes. You can have them use the shapes to create their own little avatars, their own little images of themselves. You know, make a little circle head and then add eyes with the different shapes. So, you know, really there's so much you can do. I like the, you can have a two-way arrow to show connections between ideas. So really, you know, there's graphic organizers out there. Of course, you can find an image in a Google image search of a graphic organizer. But if you have a specific one that you want to make, once you get good at Google Drawings, you can just pop it out really quick. Or have your students create their own graphic organizers for how they would like to show their learning, you know, in a different way than just writing out answers. You can use the Polygon tool. That's actually also under, get back to this, under shapes. So there's a ton of different shapes that are already set here. You can have certain sided shapes, but if you use the line tool, you can create your own polygons. So if you're teaching, you know, geometry or math, you can create, you know, a very specific shape. This would be really fun if you were teaching kids about architecture and you could have them design rooms or actually use a ruler and map out how big their house is and then draw the outline of their house with the Polygon tool. So, I mean, think about the content connections just with these simple shapes. So to use the Polygon tool, you go to the line tool, then it's called Polyline, and then it'll just keep drawing lines until you're done and you connect them. So
okay.
I can make.
And then, Kristen, I see that there's a checkerboard background.
Yes.
Do we have access to, or does Draw make graphs in the back or a grid in the back? Can you add that?
You could, let me just delete this. So an easy way to clear your board is to click and drag over everything. Then you can move them all at once and delete them all at once. So if you wanted to have a grid for the background, like for graphing, is that what you're wanting to do?
Yes.
Okay. So you could always insert an image and then find a grid. The checkerboard background actually shows that it's transparent. Oh, well, here we go. So this actually means that it's transparent. You'll notice that sometimes when you do a Google image search, that you've saved the transparency. This goes away when you print it or when you upload it to a document or classroom. It's just showing up here to show you, hey, this is transparent. But if you wanted to have a grid background, ooh, that's freaking my eyes out. You could just insert an image and then have your students draw on top of it if you wanted them to do some graphing or whatever. And then if you don't want to see the checkerboards, because that bothers some people, some kids don't like to see that, you just right click, go to background. You can change it white so it looks like paper or pick another color if you want. The last type of line that's really fun is the scribble. So students can actually handwrite out their answers. If they have a mouse, they can use a mouse. They can use their trackpad on their Chromebooks. If they have an iPad, they can handwrite directly on the screen. So that works really well. Why this is good for teachers is that I'm on the scribble here. I can actually draw my signature. I'm going to change the color of that now before I forget. And then I can draw my signature and it can exist digitally, and then I can sign documents digitally. So this is great for, you know, the only hard part is eyes. There's my terrible, terrible signature. It's my doctor's signature. Takes a little practice, but nobody likes driving down to HR any more than they have to sign time cards. And so once you've got your signature saved as a Google Drawing, you can just save this as signature. And then it's saved in your drive, but you can also download it as a JPEG. And then you can add it to documents to sign documents from afar. And then I can move my whole signature if I need it centered in the page just by clicking and dragging the whole thing. So click over the corner, create that box around it, and then it grabs all of the elements and you can move them together. That's really helpful for, you know, when you've got it lined up just the way you want it, but you need to scoot it over to add something else instead of moving each thing one at a time. You can also use the arrows to move anything, and then those are little incremental moves. And then you can delete it all at once, or you can delete it piece by piece. So even with the scribble, they act like little individual elements. So I can delete it one at a time if I need to. Oops, it didn't grab that one. Ah. So those are all the lines and connectors. There's a lot of really fun ways to use those with your students. And then this is like pretty advanced, but you can actually create diagrams. Drawings have built-in diagrams. There's a very few choices. You can add a chart, so you can use it from sheets if you've got some data and you want to add in a bar graph or a pie chart, just like you would in Sheets. This diagram here, this is something different. This is for creating graphic organizers or visual representations. Some of them are not super student friendly because they use really formal fonts in really teeny tiny sizes. So just be aware of that if you're creating these for students. You might have to increase the size of the font. But I like this hierarchy one. And then it's got a bunch of different styles. And then you can decide how many levels do you want. I want 5. I don't want 5 levels. You could do family trees this way. That would be a really fun project. And then there's limited color choices, but there's some color choices. I actually prefer the blue. And then you just click on it and it inserts it over here. If you notice, when I zoom in, it says, let me zoom in even more, lorem ipsum. That is Latin. It's the filler text. It does that so that you know that you can just click on there. And now you have a placeholder and students can replace that with real text. So if this was a family tree, the student would put themselves here and then their mom, their dad, whatever their family tree looks like. They might have 2 moms, whatever. No judgment. Well, that's teeny tiny. There we go. So that, all right, stop. There we go. We're just gonna leave it at that size now. Okay. That insert diagram can be really great. It can be a little hard to read. This is really small font. Some students will struggle to see that. But it's got all of the shapes set up for you. So it saves you some time in creating graphic organizers or diagrams. The other thing you can insert is word art. It's not quite as fun as the word art I remember. Just do my name. Yeah. So with the word art, that's basically it. It treats the word like a picture. So you can change the color now. You can change the font. And then the word acts as an individual picture, so you can make it smaller, you can make it squashy. So the students really enjoy playing with word art because, you know, they really enjoy color and font the most. That's what I found anyway. So those diagrams are really fun. The word art is fun. Some tips and tricks. When you're looking for images, if you're not using the one that's inside Google Drawings, you want to teach your students to use Creative Commons license so that they are using images that are not copyrighted. And if we show them this, we're modeling good digital citizenship for them. So if I go to Google and I'm going to do a search, I'll do elephants again. And then I'm going to go to images. What we can do for our students is go to tools, and then usage rights here. You're going to have them go to Creative Commons license. These are all ones that are safe from a copyright standpoint. And like we talked, some of these are not safe from a student standpoint. Like we talked about, the images that are included here under Insert Images, all of these are already Creative Commons licenses. So this is an even safer way to add images. Some students like to have a separate tab open. If you add PNG or the word transparent, it can help you find transparent images. So if you're trying to use, if you wanted to layer images or create your own badges, let's do, I don't know if this is going to work out, like a cutout of something. There we go. So see, some of these have that checkerboard background. Some of them don't. When you click on the image, and then you look at the file type, like this one says PNG all. That's the website it comes from. This one's clear, and then it has a checkerboard here. To me, that's a pretty good indication that this one's actually going to have a transparent background. Sometimes you copy the image and paste it over, and it has a checkerboard background because whoever uploaded it to the internet did it wrong. There we go. So this guy has an actual transparent background. So that's really great for layering images, creating comic strips where your students have little characters in a comic strip. You can add keywords to your image search, such as face or photo or the name of a color. You can add the word clip art. So really help your students narrow that image search. If they just type in the word, they're going to get every single picture that exists on the internet. But if you know that they should look up a cartoon or a clip art version, that's great too. And then you could recolor or use transparency to match the style of the poster that you're having them create. Okay, some tips and tricks for using them with students. If you send images to the background, to the back, students can write on top of it. Oops. So on my picture here, I could have students writing on top of this if I wanted them to, using the scribble tool. So they could annotate, they could draw, if you put like a map, they could use the scribble line to draw a trail on the map. They could annotate text if you put a picture of, if you took a screenshot of your textbook. So there's different ways to use drawings with students where they write on top of an image. You can actually, off to the side here, make a text box with directions so that your directions aren't on their canvas. The little square where they're doing the writing, that's called their canvas. But you can actually just insert a text box off to the side and then add directions. And then that way they'll know what to do. And then if you wanted to print them, say, for example, if they're making posters that you're going to hang up in class, then when you print them, the directions won't print on their final product, because their final product will only print what's in the canvas lines. And then you can add a video for instructions or content. It's just a pain in the butt. In order to add the video, you have to actually add the video to a slideshow and then copy and paste it over to a drawing. So I've got a link here to this lesson where I created a sorting activity for younger kids, sorting to nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. And then I've got a directions video about the parts of speech. So you can see how that works. But basically, whatever video you put on a slideshow, you can copy it over. There's just no way to directly add a video to a drawing. It just you have to use that workaround. And then the directions for how to add a video are here. So if you're really interested in adding a video to a drawing assignment, you can. You can insert a video from YouTube if you have a video you found with instructions or a song or whatever, or you can use something like Screencastify to create your own instructional video and then add it to the assignment. You can change the size of your drawing. What it is set to naturally is called 4:3 or 3:4. But if I click on File and then go down to Page Setup, I can use custom sizing. I actually really prefer to do 8.5 by 11 or 11 by 8.5 so that it is printable and it's not going to look weird when it comes out of the printer. And so you can see it didn't change much. It'll change to match whatever you've got here. But that way, when I print it, it'll show up nicely. You can also do widescreen. Those are better for, let me just show you what that looks like. So you can see how much wider that is. This is better for presentations. So if you're going to add images to presentations, you can even do a banner for classroom if you wanted to create a Bitmoji classroom. It's got to be much wider than this. You can do it by pixels, and it is like 1600, something like that. You can see how it changes it every time you do it. This no longer looks correct because it's just stretching everything out to fit the frame. So I can just go back to my standard, and now everything looks the way it was supposed to. You can hold down the Shift key while resizing an image to maintain its aspect ratio. You can move objects with the arrow keys, and you can insert a table to quickly create a graph or a place for students to fill out work. I really like tables. That's probably my favorite thing to add for students so that they've got boxes where they know where their answers are supposed to go. So even in Google Docs, I use tables a lot. Tips and tricks for saving, like any Google tool, it saves automatically, but you might want to download a picture so that you can add it somewhere else. So if I go to File and then Download, I can save it as a PDF. This is great for sharing with parents because PDFs can open up on phones. And we know that a lot of parents use their phones instead of computers to access school stuff. JPEG is an image file, and a PNG is also an image file that saves transparency. So if I didn't have a background and I wanted to save a transparent picture, I would want to save it as a PNG. So once it's downloaded, I'll just download it as a PDF. It'll show up down here in my downloads bar. And now it's a separate document that is now static, meaning I can no longer change it, but I could share this document with parents. I could put it on the website. I could send it in an email. If parents are using their phones to access stuff, they're not necessarily going to be able to open a Google Drawing document. The PDF is the safest for sharing when you don't know what what people are using to share. Oh, see, she got all small when I was changing all the sizes. There, that looks better. And then you can also publish to the web. This is also safe because it can be opened by anything. It turns it into actually a website, believe it or not. So when you click publish to the web, it creates this link that you can now have the sharing link or an embed code. So if you use Google Sites, you can actually embed images on your sites. So that's next level stuff. Students probably won't be doing that. Maybe older students who are creating websites. But that's great if you've got images you want to add to your website. For sharing, you can share a Google Drawing just like you could a doc or a slide deck. You can add it to a Google Classroom assignment. You could, and then they could have editing access just like a doc, or you can add it as a PDF, JPEG, or PNG if you want it to be an example, something static that's not going to change. The other cool thing to do with students is to force a copy. So let's say I've created, we're just going to pretend that this is a graphic organizer that I want my students to have access to. I give it a title, otherwise it won't work. I'm going to click the share button. So this is called forcing a copy. I'm going to share it with APS Public Schools so that I've got the good link. I'm going to copy the link. Now I'm going to go to my Google Classroom. So when you force a copy, it makes a new copy for students or parents. This is good for if you want to share something and have students or parents have their own copy, but not necessarily an assignment. If you don't want them messing with the original and you want them to have their own copy, you can do it that way. You can assign it this way on Classroom. You know, with Classroom, it already creates their own copy. But let me just show you, because you can also email it to people. Forcing a copy is something you can do with any Google document, slideshow, whatever. I'm just going to create an assignment. I'm going to add a link. There we go. Add a link. And then right here where it says edit, I'm going to replace that with the word copy. And so now I don't even need to make a copy for each student. When students click on that link, it's automatically going to put a copy in their drive. So that works through email, it works through Classroom. You can create a copy link on any document that you want others to make copies of. So you'll notice if you click on the links in this slide deck, for example, this graphic organizer down here, where it says link to make a copy, I've forced a copy on you. So if you open that link, you get a copy of that graphic organizer in your drive, and then you can edit it and make it your own. So that force a copy, that's a great way to share stuff with like parents or co-teachers, so that, you know, other people in your school or department, so that they can make their own and not mess up your original. All right. You can use it with Google Slides. If you're doing like group presentations or a whole class presentation, and you don't want kids to be messing with each other's slides by having all kids have editing access to the slideshow, what you can do is have students create their slide for the presentation on a Google Drawing first, and then save it and add it to the class slide presentation. So that's a great way to have kids, you know, do something class-wide, like, you know, share all their posters together in one slide presentation, with all having editing access to the slideshow, because, you know, kids are going to be kids and they're going to mess with each other's stuff. So what you can do is have students either publish theirs to the web or download it as a JPEG, and then add the slide, the drawing to the class slide presentation. Or if you want them to be able to edit it once they are finished, they would just do like I did here, click and drag, and then copy, and then paste it onto the slide presentation, and then they can continue to edit it. So those are two different ways to use drawings in conjunction with Google Slides. Okay, you're going to click on the share button. You're going to make sure
Okay.
to to be most sure, you should change it to anyone with this link. That way, like, you know, if you're sharing it with parents, and then you copy the link, and I can show you here in the bar, it works anywhere. I'm gonna paste that link, and now where it says the word edit all the way at the end there, you just replace the word edit with the word copy. And you can double check it yourself. If you put it into the URL bar here on a new tab, and I hit return now, it's going to come up with this screen, and it's going to ask, would you like to make a copy? That's how you know you've done it correctly. If it doesn't make you, yeah, if it doesn't make you open a copy and it just opens up your original document, then you forgot to change the word edit to copy in the URL. To really think about making a drawing for yourself. So think about, you know, what's going to be your purpose? Like, are you going to make a poster for students, a graphic organizer, a worksheet that they're going to fill out? What do you want them to use the drawing for? Then what format is going to work best for you? Then take some time to design it. At first, it's a little slow, but then once you get better at it, it gets much quicker. And then how are you going to share your drawing with your class? Are you going to download it, assign it to Classroom, or share it through your website? Yeah, we would create all of our spreads and then save them as PDFs and then upload them to the yearbook website.
Oh, that's cool. I'd like to see a copy of that.
Yeah, the things that they accomplished were amazing.
Yeah, and sometimes, like, yeah, before when people were doing the yearbooks, they were they put it in either Publisher or InDesign, and those programs are pretty, you know.
I've used both of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're definitely up there. So this spread here was created by an 8th grader, 7th grader. She was an 8th grader. And so I had an elective class where the 7th and 8th graders created their own personal yearbooks. So she created this all on her own in, like, she made a 16-page long book in a 3-week class.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah. And then this was not the cover that we chose, but I would have students do theme groups. And so they would come up with themes, and then we would vote on the winning theme. And I really wanted this one to win because the 80s were very popular a couple of years ago, and this one was really cute, but they didn't choose this one.
And she did all this in Draw.
Yeah, she did all this in drawing. There actually, each of these was an individual line that she created. All of the triangles were shapes, and then she used the transparency to set the transparency and just stacked up triangles on top of each other.
Oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. Look at that. That's a work of art right there.
It really is.
How did she, you know, some of those triangles are not, you know, they're kind of blurry. Is that also done? And how is that? Did you know how she did that? Yeah,
you just set transparency and then stack them. So the blurriest ones are probably at like a 25% transparency. And then some of these might be 50, and then these green ones on top are at 100%. So the lower the number, the more blurry and see-through it's going to be.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and then like this green triangle here with the little one behind it, that's 2 separate triangles, not a drop shadow. So yeah, I mean, these kids, if you give them enough time, they can create masterpieces. And I think she took probably about a week to work on this. This girl was a bit of a perfectionist. Yeah, and this isn't even the theme that we chose. So I love yearbook. That was one of my favorite classes to teach. But
it makes a visual, the images and typography and everying more accessible than if we would have to do it like in Photoshop and Illustrator.
Exactly.
Yeah, you did a great job with them.
And then student posters. This was just a quick student poster where we did fallacies. And so they used their Disney characters to come up with fallacious statements, fallacious reasonings. And so like this took maybe 30 minutes for a student to create. So you know, once you teach the kids the tools, they can be creative quickly. It doesn't take all day to use stuff. So see, there's my Bitmoji classroom banner that I created. Yeah, so drawings is probably one of my favorite tools to play with. And, you know, not everybody knows about it. So this presentation, I wanted to share you a bunch of different examples so that you could look at using it in your own classroom. Seating charts, super quick and easy way to update seating charts. You know, doing maps, annotating texts, creating choice boards. I just love creating infographics. It's an easy way for students to access the knowledge. And then if your school does a newspaper, using this is much easier than InDesign for creating newspapers. And you can create them printable sizes also.